So you gotta just laugh, right? So it's not like me to have us hear just a snippet of a story, just in the middle of a story like we did just now. Especially when we're talking about the Christmas story, it seems like, especially Christmas Eve or like lessons and carols, you get the whole package. But here we are, we're just all of a sudden talking about sheep and shepherds and angels. There was not much of a lead into this story. But I wasn't worried about having Kim start the story where she did, nor end it as soon as we usually do. Because you see, we hear this Christmas story so many times over and over and over that sometimes we don't take in the little nuances of the Christmas story. And really, when you think of it, the Christmas story is composed of many little stories. And unless you are one who remembers singing as a child the carol while shepherds watched their flocks by night, you may have jumped over this story and went straight to the manger scene. So one of the reasons I pulled this story out of the big story is that it reminds us that the night that Jesus was born, life was going on as usual. Jesus' birth wasn't a holiday back then, and so the daily activities were no different than they were the day before. And yes, Palestine was busy because the ruling government had made a decree that everyone was to be taxed in the town that they owned property. And so people were on the move, traveling here and there. But for the most part, shops would have been open, tax collectors busy collecting, fishermen still fishing, and farmers tending their crops, and bakers baking bread. And no doubt the town midwives were helping other women give birth to babies that night. Luke tells us that on a hillside outside of Bethlehem, shepherds were tending their sheep. They were doing their thing, watching the sheep eat foliage and bringing them into the corral at night. And perhaps a female sheep or two gave birth that night. But for the most part, the shepherds began their evening like every other evening, dark and quiet. Not much else to do at night with sheep, but look at the open sky and maybe count some falling stars. Shepherds back then pretty much stayed together, away from the townsfolk. They were outcast in their society, one of the lowliest people, pretty much despised by the world back then. But then, in the darkest part of the night, their ordinary lives are interrupted with a fantastical fanfare, a flashy display of heaven's best. Angels coming to declare in song that they had good news just for them. News that would bring joy for them and for all the people. A baby was born. And not just any baby, but a divine king, the Messiah. Truly, it's amazing for this bunch of sheep herders to hear good news. Sheep herders were the last to learn about anything. And here they are, the despised, lowly shepherds, getting a royal invite to see the divine one's child. For the shepherds, this would have been fantastic news, unbelievable, but fantastic. They must have pinched themselves and said to each other, like, is this really happening to us? And why us? We're not important people. There would have been no way that the Roman emperor would have shared any news with them. Only the valuable people would be presented with such royal news. In Mary and Joseph's time, The imperial government of Rome dominated all of Israel with an oppressive, fear-inducing power. The people lived in constant fear, including the shepherds outside of town. So how understanding and considerate the angel of the Lord was to them, that they began with the assurance of that they could let their anxiety go. "Do not be afraid," the angel said. Without saying so, the angels were letting the shepherds know that God found them very important enough and valuable enough to tell them such amazing news, good news, that they would be bringing joy for all the people. Fear and anxiety hinder us from fully experiencing altogether joy. Joy that is sustainable is that joy that bubbles up from deep inside us, like the bubbles that we were blowing, but also like a natural spring. Have you had the pleasure of experiencing a natural spring? My first experience was as a child in Pennsylvania. One Sunday afternoon during one of our family outings after worship, the kind of outings that my mother loved to call a Sunday afternoon drive, which she would say, with such pleasure, "We're having a Sunday afternoon drive." It was in the autumn time, and as we were going through the mountain path road, we came upon a line of cars parked alongside of the road. This was a very quiet, not many cars traveled on this road, and so I was surprised to see all these cars lined up. I thought maybe it's because there must have been a beautiful tree that was in such beautiful fall foliage. But in front of the line of cars, there were people who were standing in line, holding what looked like water jugs in their hands. And there at the head of the line, we saw water freely gushing out of a wall of rocks. Folks were taking home clear, fresh spring water. Here in the Southwest, we have numerous pools of water in the middle of the dry desert, hot springs, warm enough to take off the chill of winter and just the right temperature to cool you off in the middle of the summer. Please tell me that somebody has experienced them. It's just, they're not too far from us there at Lake Mead. Actually, I think they're called Rogers Spring. So it's cool. Look it up on your map. You'll find it. Now everyone's going to go, right? Anyway, do not put your head under the water. I must tell you that. The sign will explain why. But let me tell you, springs occur when water pressure causes a natural flow of groundwater onto the Earth's surface. As rainwater enters or recharges the aquifer, pressure is placed on the water already present, and it just bubbles up. I think that's what it's like to experience altogether joy. Jesus is our joy, the incarnation of Christ, God coming to live with us, be with us, showing us how to live. A divine presence of comfort and joy. If there was ever a people who needed to know that joy came down at Christmas, it was Mary and Joseph's people, and perhaps most of all, the shepherds. Although you and I do not experience the hardships the shepherds did, nor are we living under a military-ruled oppressive government as Mary and Joseph's people, we do go through days and months and sometimes years of emotional, spiritual, and situational darkness. And I have a hunch that some of us today would very much love for heaven's angels to break into the middle of our darkest night and declare to us great news, great news, news that will bring you joy and real joy for everyone. Whenever we are in our darkest days, in the midst of that darkness, we tend to be afraid, fearing for our future, worrying if we will have what we need to thrive, fearing even for our lives. And joy then seems to reach out. When joy seems most out of reach, joy seems to reach out. When it doesn't seem like joy is available to us, joy comes down. Over the years, I have come to see that joy is the color of grace. The essence of joy, I believe, is God's grace. And so very much like water bubbling up from within the depths of the earth to provide us with a pool of healing waters, God graced us with Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. I agree with the Wesley brothers, those two brothers that helped found our denomination, the Methodist, John the preacher and Charles the hymn writer. Charles penned the words to one of Methodism's favorite carols. We sang it this morning, "Hark the herald angels sing." And there in the first verse, we have the line, "God and sinner reconciled." The good news that is the foundation of our joy is that Christ's birth pulled away that veil of darkness so that we could be one with God. God, the source of all being, Jesus the Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus, God incarnate, God with flesh and bones who lived with us. The witness of God is our joy. And the many graces that we can experience in our lifetime help to make that joy bubble over. On our Sunday school classes, the kids and the adults have been going through the book Almost Christmas. And in today's chapter on joy, the author says that Advent joy is where words fail. Could it be that an altogether joy comes from our heart? Our minds have lots of words, right? But our heart. It's difficult to express with words what is felt with our spirits. So when was the last time you experienced joy, big or small? I hope the bubbles brought joy to your spirit this morning. What brings a smile to your face each day? Children laughing while they play is a simple joy for me. I love being so close to the preschool so I can hear them giggling in their special way. Seeing Christmas lights, that crazy blow-up snowman that my neighbor has that sometimes glows pink for some reason. And then the bubbles. Pull out bubbles, my friends, in your house and blow them. It's okay as a grown-up. People help bring us joy. Many Advents ago, I shared a story of a town in Paraguay. And really, it's 7 different neighborhoods that are built around a landfill just outside of the capital. Over 25,000 families lived in close proximity to this dangerous landfill. Lots of waste was produced by this landfill, and poverty forced the families to live near there and then to work in the landfill along with their children. And life was pretty bleak for these families. But that changed one day when Fabio Chavez, a landfill worker and a musician, he worked side by side with these families, and he became friends with the children. And seeing their hopeless lives, they couldn't go to school because they needed to work, he decided that he needed to bring some joy to them, to bring something positive to them. And so he became their music teacher. At first, he allowed them to use his instruments, but soon other children wanted to learn, and there weren't enough instruments to pass around, and so he decided to help them make instruments from the trash, the oil cans, and other things that they could find there. Today, years later, a group of kids with their string instruments made from landfill trash go around the world playing their music. You can Google it today when you get home on YouTube or however you want to find your music. It took someone outside of the community to come and bring joy, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. My friends, Jesus came into our world, came to enable joy to be experienced not just in Bethlehem, but everywhere. And that kind of joy is sustainable joy. Like the shepherd's joy comes to us, we are called to bring joy to others. Won't you be a joy bringer this year? Amen.